Hey everyone, thanks for joining me for another devlog for Dauphin, my 2D RPG about a marine biologist trying to save the ocean and its inhabitants. Today is Monday, January 3rd, the first Monday of 2022 and the start of what I hope will be an exciting year of development for Dauphin. I also hope it'll be an exciting year for the channel. I have some plans in the works to not only continue producing these devlogs, but also to create a larger variety of content around some productivity tips and some tutorials for the Godot engine. But we'll talk more about all that when the time's right. I hope everyone had a wonderful holiday and was able to stay safe. I certainly enjoyed spending some time with my family and welcoming in the first winter weather of this season, which I've been eagerly anticipating. Over my break, I also managed to make some time for Dauphin and ended up making some cool progress to help round out the diving system. So before we go too much further, let's take a look. My recent work on the diving system revolved around what to do when the player's air supply here in the top right runs down or counts down to 0. Instead of just trying to explain it up front, I'll let you guys watch this demo and see what you think. So from that clip, you can probably tell that we have a couple different things going on when the player's air supply gets low, or more specifically in the code when the remaining air supply is less than 30 seconds. Firstly, what I do is take a shader and start to apply a vignette effect so that there's kind of a darkness creeping in around the player that eventually becomes a smaller circle around the player, kind of indicating that we're getting close to a blackout and creating tunnel vision. When we get down to 0 on the timer, we again kind of modify the properties of that shader to create the effect of an eye closing, at which point the entire screen fades to black. Once we are kind of finished with that animation, the player will respawn here on the beach in kind of this recovery animation state, and we're presented with a message to kind of tell us what happened. The text that you currently see here when you respawn on the beach is definitely kind of in placeholder mode right now, but hopefully you can understand the message I'm trying to convey. The whole point is to inform the player that they have not died, but instead have been saved by someone or something. And as a result of that dive really not going as planned, they will have a reduction in experience in their diving skill. And this is also something I'm workshopping, either a reduction of this skill that you've been spending time training, or maybe you will lose some of the resources that you have in your inventory. I'm still working that out based on all your great feedback from the past devlog. So, looking at this progress, I think there are a few important takeaways. First, I'm very happy that we have kind of a basic loop for diving complete. You can embark on a dive using the dive flag from any reasonably deep body of water, and either return to the surface precisely where you started, or wash back up to a predefined respawn point on the beach. That said, there is still a ton of work to do on these underwater environments. I can procedurally generate them, which is great, but they are totally empty and devoid of life, which is kind of the whole point of exploring them in the first place. That content will come in time, but for now, much like I did with the diving system, I want to continue to build out the foundations of my major systems that will help bring together a vertical slice of Dauphin's overall gameplay. To that end, the next system I'll be building is one that I am really excited about. You've heard me mention the notion of skills a few times already. The process of leveling up skills is pretty much my favorite thing about any RPG. This system allows you to set and complete personal goals for your playthrough, unlock new content, and in my opinion can be a really powerful force to entice the player to come back and invest more time in your game. There's a lot of planning I still need to do around the shape that I want Dauphin's skill system to take. In the meantime, I'm going to use one of my all-time favorite games as a template, old school RuneScape. Now if you played RuneScape, your mind probably immediately goes to the huge number of skills in the game and how much of a grind it can be to level them up. That's not the takeaway for me right now. Instead, I'm going to try for a small number of skills with the same general simplicity when it comes to leveling. Spend time using a skill to level it up, and leveling a skill up lets you do more things with it. To that end, I have an idea of what skills I'd like to consider for implementation. The first two are kind of already in place. The conservation skill will revolve around saving organisms and cleaning up the environment. The diving skill will of course correspond to the diving system. On top of those, I'm considering fishing, foraging, cooking, and climbing. There will be plenty of time to talk about all of those in more detail soon. For now, before I build any of that, I know my starting point will be here in the player's field notes, where I'll need some new UI to support viewing these skills. You can see I've already created some new tabs over here on the right to correspond to the various pages in our field notes, and we have a new blank page here for skills. This is where I'll be getting to work. Hey everyone, quick update here on Wednesday morning. Over the past few days, I've been working hard to create the foundation for the new UI for the skills system here in my field notes. Doesn't look like much, but I have created all the underlying scenes and scripts that will ultimately need to be required to support this new system. And apart from just having the basic layout here of a kind of skill collection page and a skill detail page, I also have created a few icons to represent these skills. That's what I was working on last night. So if we go take a look here in Sprite, this is just the easiest way for me to show you here on this little grid where I've collected them all together. So starting at the top left, we have a leaf for conservation, a dive mask for diving, a fish on a line for fishing, a person climbing on a rock for climbing, and someone in Discord told me this looked a lot like the Cliff Bar guy, so this might need some revision. We have a pickaxe for foraging, and then a crafting table for crafting. And I know we didn't talk about crafting before. Instead, we talked about cooking, and I'm kind of figuring out how I can combine those to make one skill that kind of encapsulates everything that you might create with items that you either loot from enemies or get from the fishing skill or collect from the foraging skill. With the basic page layout complete in field notes and these new icons, it's actually time to move on to building out that page, and more importantly, the underlying data that actually represents these skills. Alright, we're back on Wednesday evening after work, and I wanted to give you a quick update on the progress I made this morning on the new skills page for the field notes. So we're standing in the player's cabin here. We can go ahead and open the field notes and switch to our skill page, where we will now see some new information populated on the left-hand side. So what we have here is meant to be a collection page that kind of brings together all these skills that are available to the player. And for each skill, we have a button that has an icon associated with that skill and also the player's current level in the skill over top of the maximum level. These numbers are definitely just placeholders for now until I figure out exactly how complicated I want to make these skills, but we're definitely off to a good start. Back in the engine here, this is that same skills collection page that we were just looking at, and you're probably taking a look at this and wondering, where are all those buttons I just looked at? Well, like many of the other pages, really all of the other pages in my field notes, I'm taking kind of a data-driven approach to populate these. Rather than have a bunch of static content here available in this view, I'm instead providing this node with a piece of data, a single source of truth that determines how it will be populated. In this particular case, for the skills collection page, that is the player skill manager. And as I built this out this morning, I realized this pattern has been very useful to me, so I thought I'd go ahead and show you kind of how I build out these pages in the field notes. We'll start at the top level, which is the field notes scene itself, the place where all the pages kind of live together. And I know the middle definitely looks like a mess right now, so go ahead and take a look over at the hierarchy where you can see kind of how I have constructed this thing. All that's really important at the moment is to note that I have a single control for each of the different basic pages I have in the notebook. And one thing that is shared between all these controls is that as a child, it has something called a display. So I have a skills display for the skills page, a map display for the upcoming map page, an inventory display for the inventory, things like that. So what I've been working in this morning is the skills display. When I open this up, you can see that it really just appears kind of how it's structured in the field notes. We have a left page and a right page. This very basic design of having a parent display that knows about two child pages is crucial to being able to share data between these pages. What we can do with this design is adopt a signal up and call down pattern, so that in my list or collection view here on the left, when a single item is selected, this node can signal up to its parent display with an item that we just selected. Once this display captures that signal, it can then call down to the detail page to tell that detail page it should show more information about that specific item. This is a very common pattern within the Godot engine, and it's super reliable, and I've really enjoyed using it for this purpose. If we drill even further into the skills collection page, we can see how I'm populating it with those individual skill buttons. So looking at the script, you can see that I have a player skill manager reference here in this class, and that is provided via an export variable node path, another pattern that I use all the time throughout Dauphin. Once we have a reference to that player skill manager, in this case, that player skill manager has an array of all the skills available to the player. So we can just loop through those skills, and for each one, we instantiate one of those individual skill buttons, which then knows how to update itself with information from that skill through this update with skill function. The last piece of the puzzle here is this player skill manager and how it acts as a single source of truth for this UI. So to take a look at that, we will open up our player node, which is a pretty massive scene at this point. And towards the top of his hierarchy, you can see that we have a player skill manager. This class itself, at least for the moment, is dead simple. It just has an export variable array of skills. And if we go back to the player and actually click on this and look over in the inspector, you can see the variables that populate that array. In this case, we have 6 items, and each one represents one of the skills that we've been talking about, from conservation all the way to crafting. And you'll notice that each one of these skills is a resource. That skill resource is the kind of base level building block of this entire system that I've been working on here. It's pretty bare bones at this point. You can see how I've kind of created some functions to stub out the functionality that I anticipate in the future. But for now, we just have a name for the skill, the icon for the skill, and we're tracking the current experience. Now, this will definitely get built out a little bit more over time, but you can see how this whole design kind of folds together at this point. If I want to add a new skill to Dauphin, all I have to do is create a new one of these skill resources and throw it in the skill manager. At that point, I don't actually have to change anything in my field notes. The collection page will know how to build itself based on all of the skills that are already managed by the player, so it's one less thing for me to have to maintain. Alright, I'll end my rambling overview there. I'm sure there's a lot of room for improvement, but I hope this serves as good food for thought if you're building out something similar in your game. Time for dinner now. I think I'm going to take the evening off and get back to work in the morning. We'll catch up then. Hey everyone, quick update here on Friday morning as I've made more progress on my skill page. If we go ahead and open up our field notes, you'll notice that apart from just the collection page being populated, we now have some information over here in the detail page. So before you have a specific skill selected in the collection, the right page will prompt you to select a skill, at which point you can click one of these buttons and we'll see just a little bit of data populated over here on the detail page. So we have the title of the skill at the top, and then we have a progress bar showing your progress from your current level on the left to the next level up on the right. And when you hover your mouse over top of that progress bar, you get even a little bit more information in the form of a tooltip. So it'll show you your current XP, your next level that you're going for, and basically the difference between those, the remaining XP. I'm really pleased with the way this UI is turning out so far. Both pages are very simple, and the combination of the kind of visual content here along with the hover tooltip allows me to convey a lot of information to the player without taking up too much room on the screen. What this leaves is all this space below the progress bar, and this is where eventually I will be putting all the data regarding what new content or functionality you'll unlock as you level up a specific skill. With all this XP tracking stuff now in place, I think the final milestone for this devlog will be to actually increment a skill's XP based on something that occurs in gameplay, so actually leveling up the skill. I'm off to work now, but I'm determined to wrap up this devlog tomorrow, so we'll see what we can do. Hey everyone, welcome back to Saturday just after 8 a.m. and I'm pleased to report that after a productive development session this morning, we now have a way for the player to accumulate experience within the game. So we'll start by opening up the field notes and looking at our conservation skill. When we inspect the progress bar here, we can see that we currently have 32 experience in this skill, so we'll remember that. If we go up to the beach, pick up the bronze sword, and save one of these sand crabs from corruption, you'll notice in the bottom left that apart from seeing the bronze sword we just looted, we also see the conservation icon and a +4 XP. So we'll go ahead and find another little crab here so we can see that again down here in the bottom left. So at this point, we've cleansed 2 crabs from corruption and accumulated 8 experience for conservation. If we go back into our conservation skill, we'll see that the progress bar has grown a little bit, and we're now correctly showing 40 current experience. This actually turned out to be a pretty interesting little design problem, figuring out how I want to track changes in experience across one or multiple skills at any given time. Because those changes in XP can come from so many different places, I decided to take advantage of my global signal bus to kind of capture when those changes take place. So if we actually open up my global signals file here, There's not many signals that I'm taking advantage of here, but I have added a new one for skill XP rewarded. So the arguments for this signal are the skill itself that's being modified and the XP, which can be either positive or negative. The only class that's actually connecting to this particular signal is the player skill manager. So this is kind of the landing point for all of these various reports that can happen to indicate that there has been a change in XP for a certain skill. Once the player skill manager captures that there's been a change, it knows how to properly update the skills list and how to save it and how to update various displays and show that little indicator in the bottom left corner of the screen when experience changes. Because everything gets funneled through this global signal bus, basically any scene in the game can decide how and if it wants to reward the player with experience. So obviously organisms can reward the player with experience when they are cleansed of corruption. If you fell a tree with your axe, it could reward you with foraging experience, or if you complete a dive, the underwater scene could report that you completed a dive and award you with diving experience. The end result of all this today is pretty basic, but I think it's a strong foundation on which to continue building skills in the coming weeks. I hope you all enjoyed following me along for this week of progress. As always, I want to give a big thanks to all the folks supporting this channel and Dauphin's development on Patreon, with a special shout out to my Garami supporters: Cody Odin, Finnickfu Games, Mega Ombre, Vlad Sunny, James Kennedy, Jess Sargo, Deliuse, and Happy Hippie. Thank you all so much for watching. Keep an eye out for some new content coming soon, and stay safe.